Welcome everybody to the first episode of Building the Board. It's a Windy City Gridiron draft project that we are so excited to kick off here at Second City Gridiron, where myself and a bunch of wonderful teammates are going to build a Chicago Bears draft board as we follow the draft. But before we meet the scouting room, I want to start with the big man in the chair, the GM, Jeff Berckes. Jeff, how you doing? Excited to have you here.
I'm excited, but I'm a little worried that you're not grinding film right at this moment.
I need to be. When you think about what Bears draft coverage is missing and what your goal is as the GM, what do you have in mind?
Well, I want you to give me all the right answers with your wonderful scouting team, but I also want this to be understandable and accessible for all fans that are interested in the draft. So we want to make sure that we're talking about these players in a way that makes sense for when draft night comes, that they understand who the Bears are getting on draft night.
And speaking of, because you talk about accessibility, you imply comprehension. There's nobody else that I think fits that better in the WCG staff room than WCG's own lead draft analyst, Jacob Infante, who, if you thought he wasn't going to be part of this project, you're crazy. Jacob, how are you doing, and what are you looking to achieve throughout this project?
Robert, I'm doing wonderful. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to this because like a lot of the scouting work that I do over the course of the year is, just me and myself. And I think that being able to collaborate with a bunch of different, intelligent football minds, it's really an opportunity. I mean, obviously not just for me, but for everyone else on this staff and for all the viewers, watching us to really see what an NFL war room looks like to the best of our ability. Because, you can say so much about, oh, this player is good, but I think that having so many minds and having so many people really focusing in on certain position groups, certain players, what have you, I think it's really going to enhance just how strong the draft content is, because with how many guys we have on staff, we're going to be able to cover so many different prospects at a depth that, at least in my opinion, very few people are going to be able to do. So I'm very excited. I think that this is going to be a really special opportunity for all of us and for everyone watching it as well.
Jacob, it's really cool to hear you say that. I know I'm amped up. Of course, there's a lot of draft content out there, but what do you think viewers can expect going forward on how this group will differentiate themselves from plenty of others?
We're going to be different in that we have a collaboration of, several minds who have, been doing this for a long time, who've been, scouting, who've been writing, who've played, who have coached. We have, a lot of very intelligent minds who know what they're talking about. And like I said earlier, having that many people in one room, we're going to be able to cover so much. And it's not just going to be, okay, Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, although we'll obviously talk a lot about those guys because one of them is probably going to be a Chicago Bear. But we're also going to be able to dig into mid-round guys, late-round guys, undrafted guys. And I personally don't feel like there's enough representation for that in the NFL draft sphere at this point, because a lot of people think, oh, only talk about the round one guys. That's what people are most interested in. But I disagree. There's a little bit of something in me that always wants to see the underdog, in a sense, succeed. That wants to see, there's a mid-round guy, for whatever reason, his tape's really good, but his medicals or something, or, for whatever reason, he's dropping down the board a little bit. Or a late-round guy from a small school who has the tools to really succeed and eventually outdo his draft positioning. Those are the type of things that I look for, and honestly, that's my favorite part of the draft, looking to see who the diamonds in the rough are going to be. That's what we're going to be able to do a lot in this project.
Absolutely, Jacob. And speaking of that scout team, we really ought to meet him soon. But before we do, Jeff, Mr. GM, I think we can just about let you go.
Robert, I'm going to go talk to my capologist. I'm going to go talk about the free agency board. We're going to get a lot of coverage about Bears players. We're going to do a little self-scouting as well, so make sure that you're tuned into that. And I also want to put a message to the community. You are going to help build this board also. There's going to be opportunities where we're going to have lively discussion about player A versus player B, and we're going to want the community's input on how we finalize our board. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for how you are going to impact our board.
Jacob, first things first, I want to introduce Brandon Robinson. He's going to be one of our lead scouts. I guess everybody's a lead scout, but Brandon, who are you going to be taking a look at this season? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a football coach, longtime player, longtime coach. I'll be looking at the receivers and DBs. Very excited to be looking at both. These are both positions that I played and coached. So super excited for this project, super excited to look at these players. I think we're hitting this project from a different angle that no one else is really hitting. So I'm pretty excited.
When you think about receivers and DBs that you've already watched, I mean, come on, give us a sneak peek. Who's starting to stand out already?
So two of the guys that I would say that are standing out the most for me would probably be Jalen Hyatt and Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is getting plenty of praise right now. He seems like he's shooting up the draft board. Everybody's getting more aware of him at this time. Jalen Hyatt is a guy that's going to be more recognized towards the combine, but I feel like he's a guy that's performed enough to where he shouldn't be represented just as a combine guy. Like, he's one of those guys where, like, you think about slot speed and he has all of it. Like, every single amount of slot speed you could possibly imagine, take the top off of a defense. A really exciting player.
Frankly, Brandon, I do think that that's something I can't wait to dig into. Just how much when one player isn't just good at something, but they might be the best at something, that you end up with a player with the potential to tilt the field, much like Tyreek Hill used to do for the Chiefs, now does for the Dolphins, where when you're just uncoverable, it doesn't really matter how big you are. And speaking of what you've been scouting, Brandon, Jacob, we never bothered to ask, what positions are you going to be taking a look at throughout this project, besides, all of them?
Yeah, so I'll be doing a little bit of everything because, realistically, I've been covering a lot of these prospects, but, I'm going to leave from the deep positional perspective. I'll be doing interior defensive linemen and edge rushers. Those are the two that I'm going to be specializing in. I'll also be helping out Brandon a bit at wide receiver. And if anyone needs a tiebreaker, I'll be available.
Love it.
We have a great structure in place where we have a lot of different people specializing in positions, and I think that's really going to help. And I'm excited for it. And I'm excited to be able to lean back a little bit and really focus on two positions specifically. Third, including receiver. Yeah, that's really what I'm doing, and I'm stoked for it.
You mentioned interior defensive line and edge rusher, and I gotta say that seems awfully hot button for the Bears, given where they are in the draft. So besides the two obvious names, who are edge rushers or interior defensive linemen that you think haven't quite gotten enough shine yet that you've already got your eye on?
Siaki Ika from Baylor is a guy that I absolutely love, and I know you watch him too on a weekly basis. So he's just a freaking monster. And I know that the Vita Vea comparisons have been done to death, but it's just, you don't see too many guys who are that big, who move that well. You can kick him, in as a regular nose, but you can kick him as far out as 5 tech, and he doesn't look too out of place. Another guy that I'm warming up to is Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin. I think that he's a guy you can kick, as far in as a nose as well, but he's got some quickness to him, and he's, a good gap eater, a reliable run defender. And I think that there's a good chance he could go, higher than a lot of people expect. So edge, I'll go real quick. Isaiah McGuire out of Missouri. He's someone I really like, biased towards him, maybe being a Mizzou fan, but I think that he's the real deal. And I think he's going to show at the Senior Bowl. He's going to show at the Combine that he's probably the most underrated edge rusher in this class. And then I could go, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, guys like that, but I'm trying to go, a little bit below that. Not below per se, but you know what I mean, not getting as much attention. And then Lucas Van Ness, edge out of Iowa. He can play inside, he can play outside, good quickness, insane speed to power ability. And I think that if you have him rushing off the edge, he's going to do a really good job of just churning those legs and pushing the pocket and really making an impact from an explosion perspective. So those are a couple of guys. I could go on for ages, but those are a few that I'm really looking forward to diving into deeper as this project goes along.
And as we do, if in case you heard what Jacob was just saying, and you're saying tech, 5 tech, 1 tech, what is that? I'm hoping that this is exactly the project that can help catch you up on things like that. Like Brandon, going back to you, I know I'm helping you cover DBs this year, and personally, the more I watch safety, and this applies to corner too, there are so many different ways to play corner and so many different ways to play safety that doesn't necessarily apply to some positions like the defensive line. As you go through creating your rankings, are you going to be differentiating them by what types of techniques techniques that they play, or do you see so many techniques applied across every defense in the NFL that ultimately you can't just be a zone safety? You have to be able to play catch man. You have to be able to line up in the nickel. Where do you draw the line depending on the player?
So when you look at certain stuff like Pro Football Focus, other data charting, like you see these coverages and all of these teams run every single coverage. Like in today's modern NFL, like you have to be able to play every single coverage. So like looking at it from that perspective, like you can break down and say like this guy's really, really good in man, or this guy's really, really good in zone. But like at the end of the day, like if a guy is well-rounded, he's going to be able to play through any type of defense. Like you look at you look at a guy last year, Jalen Petrie, like he's going to play in any single defense because he's able to do that. You got another guy this year, Brian Branch. He can play any defense, play any spot, like play safety, play slot corner, play even outside corner. Like you got guys like this in the draft and going to succeed.
I can't wait to dig into it. I feel like there's so much there talking about DBs that truly from a technique to technique perspective, because to use a hot button example for the Chicago Bears, Eddie Jackson is one of the best zone safeties. He's been called by some of his peers one of the best cover 4 safeties in football, and getting to differentiate the difference between who is this player in a single high roll, who is this player when they're playing zone match coverages, who is this player when on third down they line up in man, and pulling apart what everybody's good at. I really can't wait. And speaking of a position that needs to be pulled apart, I do want to bring in one of the other members of our team here, Quinten Krzysko, also known as Berckes Stats, who I feel like, Quinten, you've got a heavy load. Go ahead and tell us what positions you're going to be looking at, because I know they're important.
I'm covering the big uglies up front, offensive line and tight end. I'm excited about it. I love offensive line play, so I'm not at all upset to get stuck with that group. Stuck with it's the wrong term, because I enjoy watching the offensive line. With this project specifically, I mean, anyone who follows me on Twitter knows my work. I'm a stats guy, right? And over the last year, I've been trying a lot to get more round out my knowledge with film and trying to really dive in, jump in, understand the concepts better, understand player evaluation better. And I was excited to get the offer from you guys to jump on this, because it's a great opportunity for me to keep learning more, keep seeing more. So I want to take an approach with a lot of this of, when I'm watching guys right now, I'm asking questions to myself, and I'm searching for answers. And that's what I want to do with the coverage that I bring here. I want to ask, what is bend for an offensive lineman? Why does their length matter if you're playing offensive tackle versus offensive guard? What's the difference there? What's the difference between a drop step and a kick step and a vertical step and all this stuff that, you read in scouting reports, you go look up online on the NFL's website, scouting report, you see all these terms and you go, yeah, that all sounds great. But you don't know what half of it means sometimes unless you're actually watching the film and learning it. So I want to learn as much as I can of this terminology of the film itself and share the answers I find. And as far as a few of the players that I'm interested in so far, so the first guy that I'm going to mention, I just watched a game of him the other day, and he's fun to watch. Wanya Morris out of Oklahoma. When it's clicking for him, he just looks dominant out there. He's played left tackle at Tennessee, and then he transferred to Oklahoma, playing right tackle this year. And there's some work to be done there for sure, but it's like, I hadn't heard about this guy until a little later down my list, and I was kind of like, the first tape I put on was really good, and I was just thinking, man, why didn't I hear this guy's name before? And then I put on a second game right after, and it was like, oh, I kind of see why I hadn't heard about him yet now. But if you can clean that stuff up, he could be like a really good player. And another one who I really enjoyed watching, I watched 4 games of Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse, and he's just such a versatile player. He's got a really good short area burst, and his feet are just, I couldn't stop watching his feet on his pulls, on his movements. And he's a guy who I think could really fit the Bears scheme well. So that's why I wanted to mention him.
Absolutely, Q. There's no position that, as we put together a Bears draft board, will go unwatched because, for instance, in my case, I'll be watching DBs with Brandon, and then Q, I'll be focusing on tight ends with you. We got a couple holes in the board, so if I got to jump in on offensive line, I got to jump in on offensive line. God knows the Bears could use some help. But in particular, I can't stop thinking about Braden Willis out of Oklahoma. It's a name that I don't see getting a whole lot of shine, but he's going to test like crazy, and he's played almost every spot you can, whether that's H-back, whether that's fullback, whether that's true tight end. He's a blocking machine. He's an outrageous athlete. And I know it's not exactly the same comparison, but Jacob, he reminds me a whole lot of Chigo Okonkwo, where outrageous athlete that maybe isn't a pure fit into the NFL, but is so skilled at all the different pieces of playing football that I just think he's going to fit at some point. I'm really intrigued by Michael Mayer. I know, so vanilla to mention Michael Mayer, but Dalton Kincaid is another tight end that as receiving tight ends start to take over the NFL ever so little, I see him very similarly to the way that I feel like Tyler Higbee fits into that Rams offense, that wherever Kincaid's going to go, he's going to be able to make noise as, quote, undersized tight end, but a much purer route runner against a lot of these modern linebackers than, say, somebody with slightly slower feet. I'm going to be very interested to see his transition. Now, we do have one more staffer who's going to be helping us out with running backs and linebackers. It's none other than Danny Meehan. Danny, how are you?
Well, Robert, I appreciate you having me on today. As you kind of said, I'm Danny Meehan. I'm a local firefighter EMT here in the Chicagoland area. I've been covering the draft and doing my own analyst breakdowns, as it were, for about, I really started getting into it in like 2014, 2015, just after I finished college. So you're talking about what is it, 9 years now? And really with this project, I kind of want to give Bears fans and draft fans in general a basic idea, really specifically what the Chicago Bears are going to be looking to do within the top 50, top 75 area of the draft in terms of prospects overall. Give an idea of what to look for if they're trying to get into the draft nick world or trying to get themselves into the draft process of learning how to break down players, learning how boards go, learning what a best player available actually looks like, because there's really no such thing as best player available, right? It's more just what does the team need, and best player available kind of goes to what the team actually needs. For me, I've always been kind of, for lack of a better term, the positions I've always enjoyed and played and whatnot were linebacker and running back. Those are the positions I'll be more focused on. I'll be doing the Lunchpail Draftcast with Jacob, again, doing the full breakdown of all the positions on the field. But for this specific project, I'm going to be focused intently on the running backs and the linebackers. So you're more specifically your off-ball linebackers. So I'll be really focused in on your more dinosaur positions, as it were, the less, highly paid positions. The guys that really up until recently were representative of football. And really, this Chicago Bears organization, when you go back and look into like Gale Sayers, Willie Gallimore, Walter Payton, Matt Forte, Thomas Jones, the list goes on and on and on, and Dick Berckes, Brian Urlacher, Mike Singletary, all those guys as off-ball linebackers. In terms of what I already like from that position, I like Henry TuoTuo from Alabama as a sneak peek. That's a guy I finished breaking down not too long ago. There's obviously the running back from UCLA, who I think would be a perfect fit for the Bears going forward, Zach Charbonnet. But those are just a couple. And if I had to give you one more, there's a running back out of Tulane whose name is Tyjae Spears, who I've recently gotten to a couple of games into, who I think would be a very interesting pick, but I don't have enough information to really say much more on him other than I really like the physical traits and home run hitting ability. So once again, I'm Danny Meehan. If you ever have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at DanMeehan90. Last name is spelled Meehan. And I look forward to doing this Building the Board project with the rest of Windy City Gridiron.
Guys, I can't wait to get started. I know we've got a lot to do. So we'll close up shop here. We'll get back into the film room. And I'll see you guys soon on the first episode of Building the Board. Bear down, everybody.